So, also super. So besides like Denise having his second anniversary today, which is great, and he's not here to celebrate with us yet. I hope he's here any second. The other cool thing is Himanshu is now in Amsterdam. He successfully moved there, so he can now like participate in all our meetings. Is like in a more European time zone, and he will be a regular guest now in our meetings, which is amazing.
Yeah,
That is amazing.
yeah, and I arrived here right on time because from today onwards, all the flights to Europe, to Netherlands are banned outside the Europe.
Oh, wow. Good timing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. How long have you been? How long have you been moved?
I just arrived yesterday,
Wow.
and yeah, yesterday is also when they announced a curfew and a ban of international flights.
Wow, that is just in time.
Yeah.
Cool. Then with all this said, so let's jump into our agenda. By the way, Enrique is like out on vacation today and tomorrow. He has enjoying a long weekend this time, so that's great. And I'm not sure Denny should be here any second, I would guess. But let's start with the update on the directional items. And first one is Jed. Please fill us in.
It's bigger than we thought it would be at first. But I've learned a lot about it. I've talked to a lot of people. Maybe some of the refactors I did weren't strictly necessary, but I think the code is going to end up in a much better place and also be better positioned for some things that we need to do, like filling some of the holes that are existing issues, a lot of the code debt around the issues, spam and recapture implementation, as well as some other things people like, including instead of shown interest in, like alternate CAPTCHA implementations besides Google. So it's taken a long time, but I definitely understand it better, and it's going to end up in a lot better place, I think. And I think it's basically done. Right now I'm just writing some front-end tests, and like I told Paul on the thread today, I think this is the first view test utils test I've ever written greenfield from an empty file, so I just am climbing the learning curve of that API. All the various ways to test a view. That's it.
And now half the methods on view test utils are deprecated too. So you're gonna
Right. The only constant is change, right?
Yep.
For sure. For sure. I'm quickly filling in for Enrique in this case. So we were able to deliver the POC for the setting search functionality to kind of search on page. I will drop the link or so to one of the pages where it's implemented right now. So you can actually try it out in production. It's working like super nice in a very kind of good implementation. And we're now ready to move forward with this and rolling it out in this milestone for all the settings pages. So that will be exciting on this front. And any other direction items that's like worth mentioning? No.
I was going to say, like if this is going to be the regular thing for the kickoff meeting, maybe a blurb on the team page of like exactly what you want here. Like everything that is on the workflow board that is assigned to you is what should be here, or like I just searched for the word direction on there and there wasn't anything specific about what you're supposed to put in this meeting in this section.
So in this case, I think the direction item update should be part of all meetings we do, and are mostly focused about the issues that actually have a direction label on them if you're working on it. So those are the ones or
Right.
so that we try to communicate to our kind of like users and customers or so, and a part of the kickoff. And in general, like I think it's good for the whole team to stay informed and where we stand on this like major, very impactful directional items. To the handbook page, yes. Sounds good. But with this, then let's jump to the next point in the agenda, unless there's anything else. 3, 2, 1. Nope. All right, then I'll glance over the next things. I try to go as fast as I can to don't bore anybody. First of all, I want to start. I'm very happy to be back here. And I want to say like a big thank you to each and every one of you for like keeping this whole group like running super flawlessly, and everybody like did really a great job or saying communicating, kind of pushing forward the issues and stuff. So we're like super happy to see this and how everybody can work like individually like super well. And the other thing is it made me like super happy was like this async weekly update we do in the planning issues, to just see go in or so, and I saw like really this history of everybody, how they're like working, and there were like some conversations with Eric and people pinging or so. That made me like just super happy how well this is working. And what I want to highlight here is that's one of the things where we as a team are kind of like leading by example. This is where I want to go, right? And we now have other teams like starting to adopt this practice already. The latest one is, for example, the code review team, where actually like Kai, who was our previous product manager in his team, says, well, I'm really missing this or so, and I want to have it like in the code review team here. And now they're kind of adopting it there, and it's also rolling out to the other teams of Andre, and then it's kind of like influencing other teams already. So and I think the ecosystem team is also starting to do this. So it's kind of really cool to see kind of other teams kind of like following our example. And that only works because like each and every one of you like take this really seriously and kind of make this like super well. And it's a good pattern that's like really useful, resourceful, and big thank you. That is exciting. Cool. So then I want to bring up the big topic of OKRs. So we have like these OKRs listed or so. I think I pinged everybody or so, at least in the beginning when we rolled it out, and say, hey, please review it, make sure that you kind of are aware of these kind of things. And what I learned, I did like a really horrible job keeping everybody up to date or so, and kind of nagging people about certain things, and kind of like, yeah, making sure that everybody's like still aware of these kind of things and bring it out to immediate attention. So for me, like a big learning is I will do a way better job on this in the next quarter. So don't feel bad about anything or so. We say, oh, we didn't hit this as a team. It's fine. Like this guy's totally my fault. What I would hope though, if by kind of any chance or so you still remembered or so some OKR stuff, I would really appreciate if you have like any issues or MRs or so that are related to some of these OKRs, if you can drop them on the issues directly there as a kind of a comment link and some description, because I need to kind of go through them next week and kind of value each and one of them or so, how much progress we made. And that would just make a lot of things very much easier. And there's like still time, so potentially till the end of this milestone, it's how much time I usually take for these OKRs. So if you have anything, especially on the kind of growth ones or so, or kind of like contributing to our handbook page, like there's still time, and I would be very happy about any contributions on this front. But yeah, that's this topic. And any questions regarding OKR madness?
So we just, if we do one of these, we just put a comment there. We shouldn't try to update the percentage or do anything else ourselves, or
yeah,
make it easier for you to add them up anyhow, like have a label to tie them, or just repeat the description, I guess.
So each of the OKRs, if you click on them or so, they have a sub issue where it's like just a placeholder, and anything that you have for this particular OKR, just kind of drop it in as a comment. Hey, I did this MR, this NR, and this issue and stuff. And I will then go through and kind of like update all the percentages or so, because like potentially I need to kind of like calculate it a little differently per OKR to measure against like what was our previous expected value and outcome and this kind of things. So that's something that I'm going to take care of. But anything that you have or so as a resource that helps supporting this OKR makes it easier for me like to find the proper things.
This OKR, so they are for Q4, right?
Yeah, the last quarter. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, like we had that we had performance as an OKR. Was it Q3 and we failed with that by now, or like when do we have Q4 started?
So this case Q4 started in November. I think it was November, December, and January, because we're always like 1 month off of kind of the.
Okay, so this means that we've got this. So this means that we've got like, because we haven't been talking about performance that was assigned to Q3 up until the end of Q3, right? That's why we failed, really.
We didn't actually fail like performance OKRs in the last quarter.
Yeah, like we didn't come even close to the numbers in those OKRs.
I think we hit the ones that we aimed for in Q3 actually. Like Q4 was just like an independent one where like the company decided, okay, performance, we still made progress. Let's make another OKR on performance. So this one is independent from Q3.
Okay, got it. Okay,
Yeah.
Makes sense. Thanks.
So anything that you have like going back to what was like 13.7 or so, I think was the one or so. Everything in there, in between there is kind of perfectly fine.
What is a narrow MR?
The narrow MR rate, I have to check again or so, but I think it has in general to do kind of with like how many MRs on the deliverable scale or so we can ship with this. I think it is related to the say-do ratio. And this is kind of taking some deliverable labels into account to calculate the proper number. And then there's like a Sisense dashboard giving us some kind of numbers.
Okay. Yeah, I went to some chart. It's not like some label I should look for, like narrow MRs. And okay.
No, that's another thing that I do on the side or so, where I need to kind of fill in reports and how many MRs we ship as a team per person. And this is kind of thing we also measuring a overall kind of growth. And I did a reset with like the start of November because we're basically a new team. So I didn't take previous numbers into account, and now the whole team is like constellated differently. So I have very different numbers I need to calculate for. So we're in a good kind of like pace there, I would say. No concerns on my side.
I have an update on the performance OKRs. They are actually assigned to Q4. They're just buried down in the dev OKRs, and then there is the large OKR for all 53 routes in the product. And that's where we took those we have to work with. So, okay, we still have some time.
We still have some time. I wouldn't be surprised or so I have to check like the next OKRs for the next quarter. This is something I'm going to work on probably early next week or so to define the one for Q1 of 22. In this case or so, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's like some performance OKRs in there again. Because I think we made like good progress in general, performance as a company, and we see a kind of good value and kind of return of investment for us in regarding like user scores and how good our product is like received and running. So there's a high chance that we're going to focus on it a little more. And I think there's like some values or so for us like to define on the UX level or so on what we want to do. So there's a lot of kind of cool things we can do. And I definitely want to kind of work closely with Eric on this one, because like Eric will also have to work on his product OKRs at one point, and we try to align the engineering and the product OKRs to a certain degree that we kind of are kind of all moving in the same direction and that we don't kind of broaden our field even more than it needs to be. But I'll definitely do a better job on this one in the next quarter to keep everybody more informed and kind of make it more visible or so, and where we stand in OKRs and which kind of issues are working towards our OKRs. Cool. And then I want to give a brief overview over the team's main milestone goals for the next milestone that we're kicking off. You see the milestone board and the planning issue, everything is kind of linked in the top. And you probably have seen like the planning summary. So that's all filled out. The important things is we have to do some backstage work again, where luckily Fran is jumping on top of everything again and taking care of like group level moving. Thank you, Fran. It's not an easy task or so, and I really appreciate you doing this. Super helpful. Cool. So then the big one is settings and navigation. Like this will be a major thing that's actually involving a lot of people in our team, this milestone, which also makes me super excited. We're kind of like pooling some of our resources together a little bit more. So Himanshu, Paul, and Enrique will heavily work on like rolling out settings to all pages. And I just think this is like an amazing kind of opportunity for us as a team actually to kind of show how well we can execute and how fast we can kind of roll out some value to our kind of like product and with very little effort. And so there's a lot of pages right now where we need to kind of implement this. So, and if we all kind of pull together, then we have this like instant success very soon. And we can say, hey, we really take settings and nav seriously, provide a lot of value out of the box. And so that's like super, super cool. I'm very excited about. And see, Paul, you have a comment there.
Yeah, Enrique did a great job abstracting the functionality for this. So it should be really just plug and play for these other pages, which is very exciting. It's a really interesting feature. I'm interested to get some user feedback on it, which would be really cool too.
Exciting. Very, very cool. And then I just want to kind of answer the question because I kind of got asked once or so, and I think it's like in general an important question or so. Why we do it in this way, like roll out this like small step in between where kind of implement search in this way on every page, because it feels like, oh, that's like a lot of rinse and repeat, and it's kind of not helping us search through all settings pages. And just to give everybody context on this one, that's something I kind of talked through with Eric, and kind of strategically just makes the most sense to do in this incremental way, just for the fact that there's a high chance that like some of the settings pages are going through like some rework in the future, and how like some of the settings are grouped, how they come together. There's still a lot of UX discovery that needs to happen, and how it will kind of eventually kind of turn out, and where settings will live. And the other thing is like it's incredibly complex to do currently cross-setting search, because we just don't know which settings are there in any kind of like normalized way where we could have like a way, okay, this is potentially there. So just like implementing it in a in-page way, and you can search on this page using like something like jQuery in this case, makes just a lot of sense for the implementation itself, because we also counter the localization issue, where settings can be called different languages, and how whatever kind of like language UI I have kind of currently configured. And that was the reason why we kind of like chose it in this way. And I'm super, super happy with how the whole thing turned out to be currently or so. And I think that's a super flawless, pragmatic implementation. Makes me incredibly happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say it's going to be a big help. Like, for example, the spam stuff is just hidden in this obscure place that I forget every time. I think users will love this.
Yeah. You still need to know roughly in which settings page it is, sadly, though. But yeah.
Like the admin page. I know it's there somewhere.
That works. That works. That's great.
It's definitely an incremental step. This is not solving all the problems that we have, but I think, Roman, you put it very well. Like this is something that's achievable, that will still make things better for a lot of people, and it's something that's within our capability of doing quickly and cleanly and across all the pages that do exist. And it doesn't interfere with future plans, which, whether it's our group or another group, the settings, there's a lot of room for improvement there. And I see later on in the open agenda, Paul's got an idea. This is not something that's off the table. There have been other ideas that Michael and I have tossed around about like how we can create objects that are reusable, settings chunks that could then be surfaced elsewhere in that app and globally searched, and all these bigger ideas are still on the table, and until we have that, it kind of would be a lot of rework, I think, to implement search again under this new structure. So given our current structure, this is probably the best it's going to get, and it's a really quick and elegant solution.
And then the final thing I want to highlight, and maybe Denise wants to talk a little more to this or so, the web IDE is like also a big focus for us because we're not dropping it in this case. We'll kind of move forward with like leveraging finally Editor Lite within web IDE, and that's incredibly exciting. That's like such a major milestone for our journey and what we thought about like Editor Lite, how it should be. Not only we were able like to replace and celebrate like the remove of ACE some time ago, but now it's like also going to power web IDE, and it's like super cool. Dropping the web IDE was an option. I'm not aware of this, but but that would be super cool. And what I heard from Denise is we're also probably going to scoop up some performance improvements alongside just like implementing it with Editor Lite. And then for me, like the big highlight here that makes me like so super excited about this is if we ever come to the place now where we say, hey, it would be cool if our editor could have functionality XYZ, then it's like, oh, that's a plugin. We can do it this easily. And now it's rolled out for a single file editor and like static or kind of like the web IDE as well. And wherever else we use Editor Lite. So that's like super, super cool. It makes me very, very happy. And maybe Denise, you want to add something?
There's not that much to add here. Like I've linked to the issues that have to be tackled during this milestone. In general, the POCs out there, the performance measurements are, I believe, in the POC, not in the issue. Let me just double check. Yes, the performance. Yeah. Yes, the performance, let me just link to this. Performance results. Not in the merge request. Yeah, here is the comment. So the performance improvement, like, again, this just take this with a pinch of salt. Like the performance measurements were taken in the development environment, but in the development environment, we get about something between 14 and 25% performance increase, depending on scenario, depending on whether we do get the file open or not. So, and like whether it's merge request with several files open or something like this. So, but between 14, like I would say around 15% performance boost we could hope for just from this work. So that's pretty cool. So we can sort of hit two issues with just one task. And yeah, like delivering Editor Lite to web IDE would be a perfect celebration of 1 year effort with Editor Lite. Like I believe first Editor Lite has been presented at one of these meetings, actually, roughly exactly 1 year ago. Yeah, something like end of January, beginning of February. So yeah, that would be perfect 1 year trip. Yeah.
Awesome. Very exciting. And hopefully I didn't forget anything. And in this case, we can jump over to the open agenda. And I see Paul already has like a super crazy, not crazy idea. Please enlighten us and start a cool discussion.
So I'm not saying it's JSON files, but it's JSON files. So yeah, thinking of how, because settings is such a hard thing to do because there's so many of them. A common pattern I see in more modern applications is my settings, even from what we present to the user in the web interface, is I'm editing a glorious JSON file. And what makes this interesting is rather than having to search for the key I'm interested in, I just type in the key that I want to configure away from the default. So I think that's interesting. So we would have like a user settings, a project settings, and a group settings, and an admin settings. But rather than I have to search for the field, when you do a JSON file, I get to just type in the field, and then maybe I'm following, some sort of guide online or whatever. I think that we could do this without the backend implementation actually being a JSON file, because we can have an adapter layer that translates a JSON file to the backend fields. Although that would be less than ideal, but I think it's doable. But just from the use case perspective, I think it's interesting, or from the usability. What do you
Or
guys think?
when you put this, my thought was like it could still all be client side. Like this JSON file could be generated at build time by just scraping all of the pages and internationalizing all of the keys, and then there's this giant JSON file that all happens client side.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, is because this is just a presentation layer. Like we just present it like a JSON, and that's interesting. And I think right now with search, that's the main user goal, is I'm trying to find the key I want to change. But when I change a file, I just type in the key I want to change. And there's like really smart auto-completing things when I'm start entering keys of the possible types of keys that I can add to there. If you've never used VS Code, changing your settings, and SourceGraph does this too. And SourceGraph does it really well. I like the way SourceGraph does it.
What do you mean when I change a file? I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Maybe I don't remember what I said, so I'm not sure what I'm talking
said-
about either.
You type in a key, but when I change a file, something. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. I'm sorry, Chad. I think when I'm trying to change a settings right now, our settings are just spread everywhere, and I have to go find the field. But when I'm editing a file that's going to override defaults, I just type in the field I want to override, which is much, and it's the actual field. I'm not looking for like some sort of descriptive name that could have collision with other things. It's the actual field. So yeah, if you've never used like updating settings in VS Code, or in another kind of web app, I'd recommend checking out that the usability of it, because I found that JSON sounds non-user friendly, but it's actually, they do it in quite a user friendly way.
Okay, I think we're talking about two different things. Yeah, I know what you mean, how VS Code works, and you actually go in and edit a JSON file. But I was sort of thinking like expanding this approach we're going with, where there's like scraping the HTML on the page to sort of do this dynamic search, but extracting that and moving it to the back end at build time. Like at build time, generate and scrape all of these pages, make a JSON file that also has an entry for every language, and then that is used on the client side to do this cross-page search to drive this Uber search field, but it's all just this backend generated Uber internationalized JSON file that drives it. And that just sort of circumvents the whole, like, we have to implement a backend search and all this other stuff. It's like hacky at build time, but it would work.
Yeah, I think though, like, there's an opportunity, like searching. Users have a hard time finding a thing, so searching can help with that. But searching isn't a perfect. They still have to type in the right thing to search for. They're going to have collisions of things they want to look for. I think if we try to get to what the user's actually trying to do, they know I want to change something with SourceGraph, or I want to change some sort of merge request settings. The way VS Code does this, because there's just one place I'm updating settings. When I type in a key, and I'm going to share my screen so we're all looking at the same thing. I've gone light mode. That's a personal update. Okay. So here they have this cool, like, okay, you get to see, a glorious, things like this, and it's all one page, and there's my settings. but I can hit this awesome JSON thing. And these are only settings I'm overriding the defaults for. So I can go, and when I start typing one in, if I'm interested in like, GitHub, I know these are all the things that are going to match that key. And and then here's the description for that specific key. And this is right on the money with what I think the user wants to do. And seems, even though it's a JSON file, it seems a lot more user-friendly than our current settings page. But I'm biased because I like JSON files. So I want to know what you all think of if there's a future for this idea.
What I think is interesting on this one is if we kind of support this structure, this format, or so to set like settings or so, or manipulate settings, that would make it easier for like a larger customer to say like, okay, I need programmatically set up like projects or repositories or so, maybe with groups and stuff, where I say, hey, okay, roll it out and I have some internal way of how they generate like this kind of like JSON files, and then they have like one way, okay, now set it up and roll out like those 1,000 projects. Plop, they're all created.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
And I think it also makes like our documentation for, oh, here's how you want to update this. It's just, oh, just add this key to your settings file and it's no problem. And I think this can just be a presentation layer. I don't think it has to be an actual file on the back end, although that would be great. I think that we can get here just by presenting the settings this way. Yeah, that was my crazy idea.
And if we go this approach, it sort of is a step back and gives us a new basis to have a new UI abstraction on top of it, sort of with not being tied to things are currently all over the different place in different YAML files and controllers and everything. Like we can rethink what it looks like on top of this, that everything is in one place.
Yeah, because I think like all of these keys are going to have a whole bunch of metadata around it. And so this is like, I imagine it's just automatically generated. I imagine, and that's really sweet. Yeah.
Right. So you wouldn't necessarily have to interact directly with JSON for
you wouldn't
programmers.
Right. And what's cool is that this is all on one page. So yeah, search settings. I'm looking for, I get some things. But see, this is the issue of search is like, I'm going to get lots of false positives. I still have to search. Like, that's why I feel like the JSON file thing is really nice. Anyways, yeah.
I think this is interesting for a couple different topics that we've discussed over the past couple months related to settings. But one thing not everybody even knows is that global search did introduce the ability to search some settings, and they ran into some challenges because they're basically manually indexing our settings files. And so they chose some of the ones that they felt were, through research and common sense, were most important and most commonly accessed, but it's not a scalable solution and a maintainable solution. So something like this would be really interesting. And one of the topics that has come up that this touches on is whether or not settings should be a global, like all in one place, these are all my settings kind of view, like iOS. That's how it's been referred to by other people, but just generally like VS Code or others that just put all their settings in one place. And we do that for the most part as well now, or whether we should be breaking those out and offering them in context with the features themselves. So like everything, I think there's nuance to the answer, where it's sometimes it makes more sense to have the features in context, and sometimes it's good to have them all in one place and searchable, and you can make multiple changes in one sort of session. I think the challenge that we have with something like a flat file or a global view is that some of our settings views are rather complex. They have tables that have, you're managing multiple entries in a table and deleting records and rows from that table. Not that can't be managed in a structured data format like JSON, but I think the needs of our specific settings views. It just got really sunny. Sorry. Are slightly different than something like VS Code. But it's really something I'm very interested in. Actually, something Michael and I talked about very soon after trying to wrap our heads around the settings problem in general, which was like, what if we could take, and I mentioned this earlier, but like take the concept of a setting and make it a structured file in some way. And you could describe the title and like what elements are on that are required for the setting. And then, you as a category, as a group can wire that up to your product however you see fit. But the object that is consumed by our settings view is a structured like data file, like YAML or JSON or something else. And then we can index that, and you could provide other information in there, like internationalization, like alternate search terms, like to help feed our search algorithm. That would be sort of this like big audacious goal that we would have. It's just like abstract everything away and make it so that these components could be created by people with relatively low, like, I guess, like low friction, and without having to consider the UI necessarily, because it would be sort of a documented standard approach and there might be reusable components. And then we can consume it in both contexts, right? So we can have a global settings view that just pulls all of these objects in and lets them be searchable. But say in a merge request, there's like 3 or 4 settings that you might want to have accessible there. Maybe something in that file could show that, like, show it on these views, right? Like now you have a little settings gear or something, and it pulls up the 3 most accessed and most relevant features that you've identified.
I think it's a great idea. And I think for even what I'm describing, a prerequisite will be we need to have a lot of metadata around every setting. And I think that alone, no matter how we want to present it, is going to be a really great idea. The more we could define a setting, not with any presentation, but just this is all the metadata around it, and then automate the presentation of it. That sounds really nice. Cool.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like this, you can have both. You need to add metadata. And as far as being able to represent it, like I know there's some complex UI, but under the covers, everything is either stored in a relational database or Redis in some data structure. So theoretically, it's possible to represent everything in JSON. Arrays and hashes.
No, 100%, and it is. And like some of the more complex things I'm thinking about is like we have like some funky protected branches views, and we have like our approval rules. What makes those inputs interesting is they do have like some sort of validation with them. But these what I've seen like with SourceGraph and other ones, like it'll do that validation as I'm entering the data. Like it'll red squiggly and be like, hey, this isn't good because of this reason. So it's like lints our settings too. But yeah, either way, however we want to present it, I think itemizing all of our settings sounds like a good idea. And probably the admin settings first, because nobody uses those.
Sounds like you're volunteering to just start chugging away on it in your free time. So go for it.
There you go. I'll add that. I'll write a checkbox for it, and then forget about it.
I know Paul has so much free time, so
yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, particularly bad. Like reCAPTCHA is under reporting. It's like it's reporting.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. On a really positive note, this kind of thing, which seems like super daunting, Nathan Friend he started doing this for shortcuts, itemizing all of our shortcuts into one glorious like file, which is really great. And it's so powerful having all that metadata in one place. It's a really, I appreciate this conversation. It's because I think in the name of iteration, we've done not a whole lot of forward thinking on how we've approached some things like shortcuts and settings, and which could, and future features, probably looking for opportunities to can we data drive this presentation would be interesting. It's cool.
Like out of curiosity or so, because you thought a lot about this, and I added the question there. Do you know any other like non-editor apps or so, or SaaS kind of like really leveraging like configure like the setting stuff? Because it feels like it probably in our space where we say we're kind of very developer focused, it's kind of something where we say, okay, it's kind of expected or so. But I wonder if like, yeah, if this is a pattern that's more used.
Yeah. Well, GitLab YAML, like we kind of do it for a pipeline configuration, but there's some other reasons behind that. Sourcegraph is interesting because Sourcegraph isn't. I mean, it's in the space. It's in the developer space, but it's not an editor, and it's not necessarily a developer tool. Although it is just totally focused on code. I don't know, but I really liked it. And I've had a really good experience with it. But I've noticed too, like I think it's all these dev products I keep thinking of. I'm gonna try to see if I can find one that's not a dev product that does this. Because I was thinking of like, I think DigitalOcean and other things like that do it as well. So no, not what I'm thinking of. I think I wonder if WordPress does. Like I bet there's some CMS too, like for content creators. I bet they have some as well. I'll have to do some research on it. That's interesting.
I can think of an anti-example. Like I really wish JetBrains had this. Their underlying storage mechanism is wacky and obscure, and there's this whole like project level versus global level that's impossible to manage.
100% agree.
It's all through the UI, and it kind of sucks.
I started to use WebStorm to give it a try for JavaScript development. I really like the editor, but as you say, like the settings, they're horrible. Like I constantly need to search for everything, and still they do not make any sense to me. And I wish they would have like a JSON.
I just have a markdown file that has all of my settings, and there's a channel, the JetBrains channel. I've like figured out a way to store it in source control. So like every time I make a settings, I'm able to commit it. But there's like 2 levels and 2 different ways to do that. So it's really hacky, but I've made it work.
Oh man. Hope it's not an XML file.
It is.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
About XML.
Speaking of alternate editors, I've been trying out Nova because I'm just a Panic fanboy since I started working on computers, and they've done a lot of nice things there. It's nice to have a native Mac app running, not something on Electron, but it is. Roman did not like Nova. I enjoy it. I think I ran into one issue where I was trying to use spaces and it kept inserting tabs when I copied and pasted into the web IDE, or when I created the merge request from the command line and then opened up in the web IDE, they were back to tabs and it was failing the YAML linter. So that was not fun.
I think the most detrimental thing about Nova is their lack of Git support. Like you can commit something, but I think still by now they don't even have like a way of like viewing your diffs. So you don't even know what.
You might want to update. I think they just shipped that. There's a Git history and there's I think there might not be a diff view.
Boo.
But yeah, I mean they're working on it. It's new. It's like a 1.3 release or something like that.
Does anyone know how Sublime does settings?
Does anybody still use Sublime?
I know some people do use Sublime.
Yeah.
There is
I think they
I
use
know
JSON.
it's file based because there used to be this way to sync it automatically. I think it's just a file under the covers, and you could like store it in Dropbox or something. I remember doing that.
Well, Nova did just add the ability to sign in with your GitLab account, and it will manage your Git, credentials and accounts there, which is nice. So give them kudos for considering GitLab in their first implementations.
All right.
Well, that's the idea. Is there an issue for this kind of thing, Eric, or should I create one?
For settings,
Well, I mean, for mainly thinking about doing a JSON presentation layer.
let me just check the category. I believe there's like a high-level epic that's stubbed out, but I don't know that it's that specific. So you could probably put that as a research issue under standardizing setting. No, that's the UI components. Provide access to relevant settings in context with a feature. That's more about getting it. You could probably create an issue in the search all settings across GitLab.
Okay.
Because that's kind of
that
an
makes sense.
approach to that. So I'll put that in the agenda, the link to that epic. I don't think that epic has, oh, actually it even has a description. So good. That's a good one to use.
Cool. Yeah, I'll do that. Awesome. Thanks for letting me share my thoughts. Yeah, I think we're at time. So I'm gonna hop off.
Awesome. Was a great meeting. Really appreciate everybody's input. And with this, let's kick off the new milestone. And I'll see you all soon. Have a great day.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.